The airport exploded at dawn, not from an accident, not from militants, from a calculated French-backed strike designed to break Niger's sovereignty and shatter the Sahel alliance. But within 3 hours, something unprecedented happened. Burkina Faso's Captain Ibrahim Traoré didn't call a meeting. He didn't issue a statement. He mobilized for war. "You attack my brother, you die." 5 words that activated a mutual defense pact, turning 3 nations into one battlefield. Heavy artillery moved to borders. Rocket systems locked coordinates. This wasn't a threat. This was operational deployment. France thought the strike would isolate Niger. Instead, it triggered the one thing Paris feared most: a unified, armed, and furious Sahel, ready to retaliate. What happens in the next 72 hours could ignite West Africa's largest conflict in decades. Show more. 7:45 a.m. The strike came without warning. French-backed forces launched a coordinated assault on Niger's Diori-Hamani International Airport, a critical infrastructure node in Niamey, and a symbol of the nation's sovereign control over its airspace and military logistics. The attack was surgical, deliberate, and unmistakably political. This wasn't a stray militant raid or a border skirmish gone wrong. This was a calculated message sent from Paris through proxy forces, designed to destabilize Niger's government, fracture the alliance of Sahel states, and reassert foreign influence over a region that had publicly rejected it. But the architects of this strike fundamentally miscalculated. They assumed Niger would absorb the blow in isolation, negotiate quietly, or appeal to international bodies for mediation. They were wrong. What followed wasn't diplomacy. It was a declaration of war readiness that reverberated across the entire Sahel. Captain Ibrahim Traoré, the 35-year-old military leader of Burkina Faso, did not issue a carefully worded press release. He did not convene his cabinet for lengthy deliberation. His response was immediate, visceral, and unambiguous. "You attack my brother, you die." 5 words that carried the weight of a regional defense pact now activated in full force. Within hours, Burkina Faso's military apparatus shifted to a war footing. Rapid reaction units were mobilized. Heavy artillery columns began moving south. Long-range rocket systems were repositioned toward strategic border zones. Command centers activated emergency protocols. This was not posturing. This was operational deployment, the kind that precedes kinetic engagement. Traoré's government invoked Article 4 of the Alliance of Sahel States Mutual Defense Pact, a treaty signed between Burkina Faso, Niger, and Mali that explicitly commits each nation to defend the others, as if defending their own territory. The strike on Niger's airport was now legally and militarily treated as an attack on Burkina Faso itself. To understand why this moment is so consequential, you have to understand what the Alliance of Sahel States represents. This is not a symbolic diplomatic club. It is a hard power coalition born out of shared grievances, parallel coups, and a collective rejection of French neo-colonial influence. In 2023, military governments in Niger, Burkina Faso, and Mali formalized their alliance after years of frustration with ECOWAS, the Economic Community of West African States, which they viewed as a vehicle for French interests and regional elites disconnected from the realities of insecurity, poverty, and foreign exploitation. These 3 nations, all former French colonies, all rich in natural resources, all plagued by jihadist insurgencies that metastasized under foreign military presence, decided they were done playing by rules written in Paris. They expelled French troops. They canceled defense agreements. They pivoted toward Russia for security partnerships. And they built the AES as a counterweight to ECOWAS and its external backers. The AES was always more than rhetoric. It included intelligence sharing, joint military operations, coordinated border security, and a mutual defense clause that transformed an attack on one into an attack on all. But until now, that clause had never been tested. The strike on Niamey was the test, and the response from Traoré confirmed what many suspected, but few had seen operationalized. The AES is a living, breathing military alliance willing to go to war to protect its members. This is not the African Union's cautious diplomacy. This is not ECOWAS endless summits and sanctions threats. This is 3 militarized states with battle-hardened armies, significant arsenals, and leaderships that have already crossed the Rubicon of international isolation. They have little left to lose and everything to prove. France, for its part, has never fully accepted its diminished role in the Sahel. Despite the formal withdrawal of Operation Barkhane, despite the closure of military bases, despite the diplomatic ruptures, Paris has continued to exert influence through intelligence networks, private military contractors, regional allies, and economic leverage. The uranium that powers France's nuclear reactors comes largely from Niger. The political stability of Francophone West Africa has long been managed through a combination of economic dependency, military intervention, and elite co-optation. The wave of coups that swept Niger, Burkina Faso, and Mali represented a direct threat to that system. Young military officers, many of them trained by France, turned against the very structures that trained them. They accused Paris of exploiting their resources, prolonging insecurity to justify military presence, and propping up corrupt civilian governments that served foreign interests over their own populations. The airport strike was an attempt to reverse this trajectory. By targeting a high-value infrastructure site in Niger's capital, the message was clear. Your sovereignty is conditional, your alliances are fragile, and your rejection of French influence will come at a cost. But the strike did not isolate Niger. It did the opposite. It galvanized the AES into a single operational entity. Within 24 hours, military command structures across Burkina Faso, Niger, and Mali were coordinating in real time. Intelligence assets were pooled. Air defense systems were synchronized. Border zones became unified front lines. Traoré's rhetoric was not empty bravado. His government issued a direct warning to any nation or group hosting forces that participated in the attack. You will be considered an enemy combatant, and your territory will be treated as a legitimate theater of war. This is where the stakes become existential. If France or its proxies used bases in neighboring countries to launch the airport strike, those countries are now directly implicated. Benin, to the south of Burkina Faso and Niger, has long been suspected of hosting French intelligence assets and maintaining quiet security cooperation with Paris. Ivory Coast, a major Francophone economy and historical French ally, has been watched closely by the AES for signs of military buildup or logistical support for anti-AES operations. Traoré's warning effectively redraws the map of West African conflict. A strike launched from Beninese or Ivorian territory would justify, in his calculus, military retaliation against those territories. This is not hypothetical saber-rattling. This is a doctrinal shift that transforms the entire region into a potential flashpoint. Mali's response mirrored Burkina Faso's. Colonel Assimi Goïta, Mali's military leader and another signatory to the AES pact, mobilized units along Mali's southern and western borders. Malian forces, already engaged in counterinsurgency operations in the north and center of the country, redeployed strategic assets to support potential operations in solidarity with Niger. Mali has its own history of tension with France, having expelled French forces in 2022 and invited Russian military contractors to fill the security vacuum. Goïta's government has been equally vocal about sovereignty, resource control, and resistance to Western intervention. The airport strike on Niger was, in his eyes, an extension of the same foreign meddling that Mali had already rejected. His message to Traoré and Niger's leadership was one of total alignment. The AES stands as one, and any aggression against Niger will be met with collective force. What makes this moment so dangerous is the precedent it sets. For decades, West African conflicts have been managed through negotiation, mediation, and the threat of regional intervention coordinated by ECOWAS and backed by France. But the AES countries have formally withdrawn from ECOWAS. They no longer recognize its authority. They no longer participate in its summits. They view it as a compromised institution that prioritizes Western interests and elite preservation over genuine security and development. By invoking their own mutual defense pact and threatening direct military retaliation, they are effectively creating a parallel security architecture in West Africa, one that operates outside the traditional frameworks and answers to no external power. This is not just a regional spat. This is a realignment of power in one of the most strategically important regions in Africa. The Sahel is a corridor of insecurity, migration, resource extraction, and geopolitical competition. It sits between the Maghreb and coastal West Africa, between the Sahara and the Gulf of Guinea. It is a transit route for arms, drugs, and human trafficking. It is a battleground for jihadist groups affiliated with Al-Qaeda and the Islamic State. It is rich in gold, uranium, and other critical minerals. And it is increasingly a theater of competition between Western powers, Russia, Turkey, and Gulf states. The AES alliance, by consolidating military and political power in the hands of three militarized governments willing to defy international pressure, has introduced a wild card into this equation. France cannot ignore this. Paris has spent over a century building and maintaining influence in Francophone Africa. The loss of the Sahel is not just a diplomatic embarrassment. It is a strategic defeat with real economic and geopolitical consequences. French energy security depends on Nigerian uranium. French credibility as a security guarantor in Africa depends on its ability to shape outcomes in its former colonies. The rise of the AES and its explicit rejection of French presence represents a direct challenge to that credibility. But direct military intervention by France is fraught with risk. Public opinion in France is weary of African entanglements. The political costs of another prolonged deployment are high, and the AES governments have already demonstrated a willingness to escalate rather than capitulate. This is why the airport strike was likely executed through proxies. By using regional actors or affiliated militias, Paris maintains plausible deniability while still delivering a kinetic blow. But the proxy strategy has now backfired. Instead of isolating Niger, it has triggered full-spectrum mobilization across the AES. Instead of weakening the alliance, it has operationalized it. Instead of deterring further anti-French sentiment, it has hardened it. Traoré's rhetoric, extreme as it may sound, resonates with a population that sees foreign interference as the root cause of their insecurity and underdevelopment. His willingness to escalate, to threaten direct military action, to invoke mutual defense, is politically popular domestically and aligns with a broader wave of anti-colonial sentiment sweeping across African youth. The implications of this extend beyond the Sahel. ECOWAS, already fractured by the withdrawal of Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger, now faces the possibility of armed conflict between its remaining members and the AES bloc. Benin and Ivory Coast, if implicated in hosting or facilitating the airport strike, could find themselves under direct military threat. Nigeria, the regional hegemon and ECOWAS heavyweight, has so far remained cautious, balancing its desire for regional stability with its wariness of the AES government's anti-democratic credentials. But Nigeria cannot ignore a shooting war on its northern border. If the AES escalates, if Burkina Faso and Mali launch punitive strikes into Benin or Ivory Coast, Nigeria will be forced to choose sides. Russia watches all of this with strategic interest. Moscow has deepened ties with all three AES countries, providing military equipment, training, and private military contractors from the Wagner Group and its successors. The AES alliance is a geopolitical asset for Russia, a foothold in a region traditionally dominated by France. Any escalation that further isolates Paris, that deepens the AES dependence on Russian support, that destabilizes ECOWAS, serves Moscow's broader strategy of challenging Western influence in the global South. Russian advisors are already embedded with AES militaries. Russian propaganda outlets amplify anti-French narratives across the region, and Russian arms sales to the Sahel are increasing. The airport strike and the AES response play directly into this dynamic. Turkey, too, has increased its engagement in the Sahel. Ankara has positioned itself as a non-Western security partner, offering drones, training, and economic investment without the colonial baggage of France or the authoritarian reputation of Russia. Turkish drones have already been deployed in Niger and Burkina Faso. Turkish companies are involved in infrastructure and mining projects. Erdogan's government sees the Sahel as part of a broader strategy to expand Turkish influence in Africa and the Islamic world. The fracturing of ECOWAS and the rise of the AES create openings for Ankara to deepen these ties, offering itself as a credible alternative to both Western and Russian models. The United States has largely remained on the sidelines of this particular crisis, but American strategic interests in the Sahel are real. Washington maintains a drone base in Niger, a critical asset for counterterrorism operations across the Sahel and the broader Sahara. The stability of the region matters for migration control, counterterrorism, and competition with Russia and China. But the U.S. has little leverage over the AES governments, which view American support for ECOWAS and France as part of the same neo-colonial system they are rejecting. The airport strike and the AES response put Washington in an uncomfortable position. Continue backing a regional order that is collapsing, or engage with military governments that violate democratic norms but control strategic territory and resources. What happens next is genuinely uncertain. Traoré has made a threat. His military is mobilized. The Mutual Defense Pact is activated. If France or its proxies strike again, or if evidence emerges that Benin or Ivory Coast facilitated the airport attack, the AES may follow through on its warnings. A cross-border military operation by Burkina Faso into Benin would shatter what remains of regional cohesion. It would force ECOWAS to respond, likely with sanctions, possibly with military intervention. It would draw in Nigeria, invite deeper Russian involvement, and potentially ignite a broader conflict that spreads beyond the Sahel into coastal West Africa. But there is also the possibility that this moment becomes a turning point toward de-escalation. France may recognize that further destabilization of the AES risks a military quagmire it cannot afford. ECOWAS may accept that the Sahel bloc is not coming back, and that a new regional architecture must emerge that accommodates the AES's demand for sovereignty and non-interference. The AES countries, for their part, may use this moment of unity and mobilization to consolidate their alliance, deepen their security cooperation, and build a model of governance that can survive without external validation. What is undeniable is that the old order in West Africa is dead. The days when Paris could orchestrate regime change, deploy troops, and dictate policy through compliant elites are over. The AES has rejected that model, and it has the military capacity and political will to defend that rejection with force. The airport strike was meant to break that will. Instead, it crystallized it. Traoré's response, crude and uncompromising as it was, reflects a broader sentiment across the Sahel. Sovereignty is not negotiable, alliances are not symbolic, and aggression will be met with retaliation. The question now is whether the international community understands that this is not a temporary disruption. This is a structural shift. The Sahel is no longer a passive theater of foreign intervention. It is an active zone of resistance, where young military leaders backed by mobilized populations are willing to risk war to defend their autonomy. France has lost its grip, ECOWAS has lost its authority, and the AES has emerged as a credible, if controversial, alternative power center. Is this the beginning of a new Pan-African security model, one that rejects external dependence and builds sovereignty through regional solidarity? Or is this the prelude to a devastating conflict that will destabilize West Africa for a generation? The answer depends on the choices made in the coming days and weeks. But one thing is certain: the strike on Niger's airport did not weaken the alliance of Sahel states. It weaponized it, and the region will never be the same.